Good afternoon and welcome everybody to our seminar series, What Were We Thinking? In this afternoon session, we have a change of speaker and I'm really delighted to hear from Ernst Ferg today. And Ernst is an associate professor in the Department of Chemistry at NMU. I'm sorry, Ernst, I had to do a little bit of a dig to look into your work. And I have to tell everyone, you are a C2 NRF researcher, so you're an established researcher as well. Ernst's primary work in terms of or primary research field, if you like, is, I believe, electrochemistry and battery technology as well. And Ernst is also currently an advisor to UYILO, which, as I understand it, it means in Xhosa to create. That's what UYILO means. And it's a national electric vehicle program that's hosted by Nelson Mandela University and seeks to ready SA for introduction into electric mobility, electric technology and such. So Ernst comes from a scientific background and is able to share with us a different kind of perspective in this seminar series. And I'm super stoked that we have a natural scientist and established researcher here to join us and to shed some light. This particular talk asks, or is entitled and asks us a question: how much bias is a scientist allowed to have? So I'm intrigued by this question. I think it's already philosophical in its title. And I think, we're going to find out really what Ernst's perspective is when we're talking about what were we thinking, and we're thinking about crises and thinking about problems and solutions, in terms of the scientific information that we have out there. I suppose it's a question of how we use it and how can we use it and such. So Ernst, when you've got a moment, I'll pass over to you. We'll listen to you for half an hour and then we'll afterwards have a nice sharing of perspective and field some questions.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to share my screen.
Great stuff.
And I'm going to go straight into the presentation.
There we go.
And presentation mode. That should be hopefully fine.
Perfect. Thanks so much. I'll go off camera for
Great. Thanks for the introduction and enjoying the series, listening to, what were we thinking. And I think being a father of twins who are sort of into their young adult years, and we often say that, what were you thinking when you did that, or when you touched a hot plate or tried to stick your sister's head in the fish pond. But I think as adults, we don't actually stop asking that question. So yeah, thanks. That's why I'm really enjoying the series that we're talking about. As mentioned in the introduction, I'm a research associate or a research advisor to the UYILO program. And also I've been at the university now this year, 25 years. And for the last 20 plus years, I've been sort of on the safety, health and environmental chairperson for the Faculty of Science. Obviously, chemistry is a high-risk environment, and lessons learned from that exposure and being involved with a number of different scientists from different fields also gives me a little bit of interesting perspective on certain things. Just the outline, just to give a little bit of things that we're going to be looking at this afternoon. 3 intersecting concepts: the principle of the path, the Swiss cheese effect, the Dunning-Kruger effect, and then sort of a disclaimer. What I'm talking about is not a new topic. So we'll look at that briefly. What am I saying there? And then I listened to a talk about 3 or 4 weeks ago about global warming, exactly the topic that we are addressing at NMU, from a fellow at the Habeck Institute in Germany, which I'll expand a little bit on. The art of reviewing, we'll talk about that. And then I'm just going to conclude with changing our perspective and helping us along that way. And who actually in the world is maybe getting it right. These are my 3 circles. Why 3 circles? These are sort of my life, current life sort of interests. 3 circles is they sort of give you a nice intersecting region here in the middle that you can say, oh, this is a nice sweet spot. If I can get these sort of three things to think about, I can sort of navigate life as a whole. Also makes my talk a bit shorter than trying to have like 6 or 7 different circles and trying to navigate that. So how do these three areas influence how we think about life and impending events? And I'll unpack each one of those individually. Maybe just this one. Just want to move my little screen on the side here because it's actually interfering with me trying to read my my slides. Just here, the disclaimer. Here we have Isaac Asimov saying science is a set of rules to keep us from telling lies to each other. All scientists really have is a reputation to tell the truth. I'm not quite agreeing with that. I sort of rather let's call it biased truth for any better words. But I like what Stephen Hawkins says. He says, I think that science itself is morally neutral and that yes, the data is neutral. It's not going to, you can look at data as much as you want. You can ask data for an opinion, but it is what it is, the data. But scientists themselves are not necessarily morally neutral. They have moral responsibilities. And as we will see, hopefully, as we unpack these things, we also have moral irresponsibilities that we sometimes end up with. Disclaimer: this question about scientists and thinking about ethics and why, how far can I push the envelope, is not the first time that we've actually asked this question. And there's an interesting article written, Reasons Scientists Avoid Thinking About Ethics. And I think a few fellow scientists can agree with that. It's another nice topic that we want to spend time on. And there were even a whole series of publications in sort of a volume from a journal that just actually addressed this whole topic on science and ethics. So yeah, just a disclaimer, this is not a new topic. It's really out there and people are looking at that. In part, what also stimulated this thought is, and I think as academics, we sort of frown about this and say, oh, now we know about these academics. And just one example is ethics in publications. But we also want to ask the question, but also where and for whom should I be doing science? But the easy one that we can deal with is ethics. And we've seen many of these articles coming out, and integrity at stake, publish or perish type mentality. We know all about predatory journals and predatory publications. And and reading up on this is quite scary that some scientists, people publish, 400, 350, 400 journals a year. It's like scary. That's like one journal a day. And obviously that's really on the extreme side. But then I sort of make myself feel better and say, well, I publish maybe 4 or 5 journals a year. And at least I'm not as bad as the other scientist who only publishes 1 article every 5 years. At least I'm sort of, midway in between or reasonable. And that's sort of almost and tongue-in-cheek sort of justifying, what we are doing is all right. We'll publish a few articles, but this effect in this one space of publications, what drives us to actually engage with that sort of thinking, and in particular, how does it actually engage with our own sort of moral ethics and integrity? So yeah, so that is on that concept of publications. So there is a tension in communication. Has the message actually changed from its original intentions? And I think we need to maybe address that. And I think that I'm going to unpack quite a bit and talk about that. What was the actual communication that went across? And how does it impact what we believe, and how do we actually respond to what we believe and what with the message that we've got? I'm going to look at those 3 circles that I talked about. The first one is the principle of the path. It's a principle, just so that in terms of terminology, it's like Archimedes' principle. It's something that is there. It's not a law or a rule. Laws and rules we can break, as I indicate here, a little picture. The principle of a path is you're on that road, you're traveling to a certain destination, and you will arrive because that's the path you're on. Modern paths, roads makes use of road maps. If someone's been on it, they will map it out. They will give you signboards, they will give you barriers, they will mention, you know, that there are problems ahead, or roadworks, or stop and goes, or whatever. And there are limits. And unfortunately, sometimes we then question those limits, as I was questioned here. And I ended up getting a selfie between Neisner and Sedgefield. And I can just and rationalize it myself. You know, how dare they, you know, trap my speeding? You know, it was a double lane road going downhill, speed limit 60, like really, you know, but we justify that ourselves, and we sort of argue ourselves in circles. But anyway, I ended up getting a nice selfie in the post. And we know that from our students. And I think as lecturers, we just a few weeks ago had to sign a form from our postgraduate students that say, you know, I have an intention to submit. But now we know the student is on a path to submit, hopefully by the 6th of December. And from experience, we know some students, it's going to be a rocky path. Some students, we know it's going to be quite comfortable, you know, being able to submit, actually have that final document in place. So intentions is difficult to the actual path that we are in. And we need to just remember that. And obviously, if we want to change direction, and this is what we are going to lead up to, if we want to change this direction that we are going in globally or nationally, you know, it's tough. It's a tough intention and things that we have. But it's a principle. We can't change that. So we are on this path, and there's no talk to, and we sometimes talk about, oh, we need to turn back. But once you move forward in time, you cannot actually go and turn back. And I think maybe that's a fascination with humans, that we like to maybe time travel. That would be nice if we could do that. We could actually maybe go back to the past and fix the things that I should have been more aware of. Or we also like to maybe travel into the future and feel more secure. Oh, it's okay, you know, the future looks bright and it's fine and everything's in control and everybody knows what they're doing. So I guess time travel has its own fascination with humans. It gives us some sort of control. That's why we go and consult fortune tellers. We watch movies about traveling into the future, and every morning we wake up. What do? We look at the weather. What's the weather going to hold for today or for the weekend? So we like to see what's happening ahead of us. Just to quote a famous quote, and please let's see how people react to this one. Famous being said, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you. And that comes from Cheshire the cat. And this is where the contention actually starts. If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And that quote has been used and been used for many seminars, and business people use it. They go all over the place, and motivational speakers, you know, really harp on this thing. But if you actually go and look at the original where it was quoted from, Cheshire the cat actually didn't say that. Alice comes from Alice in Alice in Wonderland, and the cat said, "Would you tell?" Sorry, Alice asks, "Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?" "That depends on a good deal where you want to go," said the cat. "I don't much care," said Alice. "Then it doesn't matter which way you go," said the cat, "as long as I get there somewhere," Alice added. The cat says, "Oh, you're sure to do that if you only walk long enough." Okay, so that is taking a phrase that has become popularized, and the original saying was quite different, and it's actually quite lengthy. And I like this, this author from this blog actually said, the simplifying and popularizing of quotes. And he says, this is not actually what the cat said. And all he could conclude with saying, there's a minor sin here. It is just sloppy sourcing. But this sentence has actually become quite popular. This comes to my next circle, called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And please don't shoot me down, because I'll get to a point that this is, again, one of those things. It's become popular. It explains our psychological thinking. And I love, and anything, any sayings that actually eventually ends up on a T-shirt, obviously must have a social effect and social impact. You know, even you can buy a T-shirt that says the first rule of the Dunning-Kruger Club is that you don't know you're a member of the Dunning-Kruger Club. And I love this illustration where we start off with confidence that we start a project, and we climb up this hill with exceeding confidence that we know it all and everything, and until we actually reach the top of that hill. And then we go down the slope. We suddenly realize that there's more to life than, or to this topic that we realize, that we think. And we see this every day when we engage with students, the enthusiastic students coming in this year to apply for next year's masters. The enthusiasm is great, and you know, everything's going there. And then we follow the students' path as they go down the slippery road or slide, and then hopefully when it gets complicated, they then actually level out. So there are many variations out there. And the funny thing is actually quite interesting. The original Dunning-Kruger study was actually by Justin Kruger and David Dunning. And funny enough, they, you know, in popular culture now, it's actually swapped it around. So the actual study that was done by them was the unskilled and unaware of it, how difficulties in recognizing one's own incompetence leads to inflated self-assessment. And if you actually look at the figure that is published by the authors, it looks something like this. And you look at it, and probably like most of you, I feel rather uninspired. I have no idea how to actually apply this to any aspect of my life. There are no nice curves with nice statements on top of it. There is concepts and ideas there. And yeah, so somehow this concept has actually become popular in social media, and it's become the Dunning-Kruger effect that originally came from this set of studies. I've sort of created my own modified version of it, just to sort of help me, you know, navigate through life. That yes, through confidence, we usually start off low, and there's some new project that comes our way, and we burst with enthusiasm. Eventually, we reach this peak, which sometimes we also call the peak of Mount Stupid. And then eventually we come down the slippery slope, and hopefully at some stage we sort of gain some sort of competence, experience, and know-how that we can actually climb this plateau. And again, what I would like to put on this scale is time. It's time-based. You can't go back. You can't recreate things. And I've added some features to this one. There's like to, in my own life, put little steps, stop and go signs, you know, that instead of slipping down the slide extremely fast, that there are little barriers that actually just stops me, gives me time to evaluate, am I on the right road? Am I tackling this project the way I should be tackling it? Or, you know, do I maybe change direction completely, or do I actually continue where I am at? What I've added to this is actually this additional line that sometimes we see particular students. We can apply to students, to countries, to our nation, to the globe as a whole, dealing with issues. That sometimes this line can actually go all the way into the negative trajectory down below this confidence line, and then it's very difficult once you're stuck down here. You can either then give up, or you burn out, or you reach destination, oops, and you just cancelled, and that's it. You throw in the towel, and there's many sayings on those things. And then to actually crawl back from this negative trajectory is very, very difficult, because you don't know, you know, you are caught up in this negative emotions around whatever project you tackled. It's very difficult to crawl out of that pit. So this sort of gives me some sort of picture again of how to tackle life, how to tackle certain topics and things that are around us. Again, nothing new. Somebody actually makes a lot of money from this. It's called the Gartner Hyper Cycle, or Hype Cycle. The Gartner Hype Cycle is a graphical presentation developed, used, and branded by the American research advisory and information technology firm Gartner to represent the maturity, adoption, and social application of specific technologies. So this is exactly what he does. He makes money from this. It's brilliant. That, you know, you go and investigate various technologies, you write about them, and then people that have lots of money and lots of time, they then throw money at this technology. Eventually, this peak of inflated expectations gets hit, and then it comes down. Either the technology is not mature, or there still needs to be some more lab work, or it's more complicated than we expected to scale something up or to go into mass production, all sorts of things that are there. And then hopefully it doesn't trigger, filter out to the bottom and closes, or hopefully it actually comes up with people actually investing in this technology. And here's just one, there's just one picture where people really go and make these graphs extremely complicated. So there's a lot of information in it. And actually, economists actually publish on these graphs. So they say, okay, the Gartner hype cycle for this technology actually was successful, or they made this and this and this mistake. But obviously, they're making a lot of money out of this. So yeah, so that is something visual. It represents, it makes us hopefully feel and understand our world that we live in a little bit more clearer. And just briefly, what this hype cycle is all about is an innovation trigger, peak, trough, and slope of enlightenment. One can look at that. Here, I've just got a list of, this is pretty much what got me onto these interesting topics of looking at life differently and reading some books. And what got me actually reading is Malcolm Gladwell's book on outliers quite a few years ago. And it's quite a dated book by now. So if you actually read it now, I'm sure he has a lot more to say about some of the recent outliers, and outliers being people that have achieved over and above what your average person is in society. And he talks about Bill Gates and the like, and really stand out in society. So that got me onto the topic. And Critical Thinking is also a very good book that, again, we have maybe a bit of a negative feeling towards that word critical. It's not being a critic or criticizing someone, but actually to think critically about something. And I think Brené Brown talks about it very nicely. And when she talks about, if you want to be a critic, come and join her in the arena, and then we'll talk again. It's always nice to be a critic on the sideline, but a critical thinker, critical reviewer is something different. And if you want to really be depressed about something, about the state that our world is in, two very fascinating books that really got me going is Ultra Processed People by Chris van Tulliken, and then Metabolical, Robert Lustig. And I will refer to him quite a bit in my talk. He really talks about this ultra processed foods, how it actually impacts our society and all these big corporates, how they actually deal with things. But what is standing out for it is actually a review book. And we read review articles, but this is a thorough scientific reviewer. He spent years writing the book, but it's facts. I would actually go and read it, and then I don't believe it, and actually go to the article that he's referring to, and then you actually go and read the scientific article, and you say, oh, okay, it makes sense now. So he wrote it very well, very brilliantly written. I do need to move up on a little bit, and this one, I just want to move this out. Dan Ariel, Misbelief, also very powerful, where he talks about his own experience of how do people get sucked into conspiracy theories. He's just a psychologist giving advice during the COVID times, and suddenly he's just been targeted by conspiracy theorists, and he describes this misbelief that people get caught into, and this funnel and this vortex that you get sucked into this this funnel of misbelief, and it's very difficult to get out. And he talks about his own experience of trying to deal and understand these conspiracy people, and writes about that. A brilliant book on that. So I'll touch on some quotes from these things. A current book that I'm chewing through is called The Human Contribution, James Reason. I actually had to get the hardcover from the library. The online book is a bit expensive. It's about 900 Rand, but I got the hardcover and busy chewing through that. Very difficult to chew through, and thoroughly enjoying it. And talking about, and he came up with this concept, the Swiss cheese effect. He actually didn't originate with it. He had various models that he then put together, and talking about how do events actually happen? How do nuclear reactors actually explode, or aeroplanes crash? He talks about surgeons in hospitals. How do they actually have a botched operation, and what actually led up to that event? And we can apply this to all areas of our own personal lives, and what has led up to my event that actually happened for me to I don't know, get divorced or to have financial breakdowns or whatever. And we can apply it globally. And it leads into what were we thinking? Didn't we see that coming? Didn't we have those barriers in place? And he talks about these barriers. It's only the very last person that actually does the surgery or flies the aeroplane that's actually responsible. But all the things that led up to that event from happening is what is quite challenging. And to try and apply this it's much easier to try and apply this to a corporate, to a nuclear facility, or to a surgeon, or to an airplane. But imagine trying to apply this to a social dynamics of an event that's like a civil war, or the 21 kids that died in a tavern in East London. What led up to that event? What were the slices that were not in place that actually, from a social point of view, that has led up to that? And I'm not a social engineer, so good luck to try and actually filter and put those things in place. What has actually led up to that? Another one is happy chemicals. We all know that. If you speak to a neuroscientist, he'll tell you, no, this is nonsense. But it has caught popular terminologies, and we'd sometimes use it. We're saying, oh, I've got my dopamine rush, or I need to go and hug somebody because my serotonin levels are low. And we actually use this in contemporary language now. But a neuroscientist might just frown at you and say, but that's not how it really works in your brain. But we have popularized it. Coming to the talk given by the fellow at the Hans Wissenschaftskolleg. I was there on my sabbatical in 2018. So they do these talks every Wednesday. They give a talk by the various fellows, sabbatical people, academics that are living in that place in northern Germany. And he talked about exactly this topic that we are addressing. What will future climate change mitigation look like under geopolitical conflict and fragmentation? And an Australian scientist, and he is working together with I think a psychologist in the social sciences. And it's the very first time looking at this whole complexity of things. He obviously talked a lot about graphs, and if this trend happens, really got my brain fried in terms of the graphical representation. But the very first time they're trying to address this whole topic of climate change is this concept of human greed. And that is like, oh, are we allowed to use that word in social media? It's like corruption. It's them, it's those out there. And greed, we're not allowed to talk about greedy people. I don't feature in that because I publish my 5 papers. I don't publish more. There's no greed linked to that at all. So yeah, and that's just a tongue in cheek on the side. But he's trying to link human greed and the whole ramifications of trying to marry that with climate change to this idea that we don't really want to know what's lying ahead of us. And that we have so much knowledge, we have all the good intentions that are out there, we have all the concerns, we meet together at every COP meeting once a year, and there's always good after parties with those things, but it never leads to action. And he's trying to talk to a social scientist and I think he's writing a book maybe about this whole living in denial, ignoring the facts, and what is actually at the core heart of this thing. And it will be interesting to read his study in terms of he wants to put that concept in there, human greed. It will be interesting how that will work out. Again, looking at global warming and where does it fit on the Dunning-Kruger curve, if I can use that illustration. If you look at data, my brain struggles to actually work through this type of information. It's too much. There is a 5-year average, moving average, there is an annual average, and then you get these statements coming out from the UNEP, and suddenly methane is also mentioned. It's too much information, and I feel that we're probably on the top part of that Dunning-Kruger, for any better illustrations part. We haven't quite slid down that path and come up with some catchy, phrasey, acceptable terminologies that we can actually identify with. Like what the Cheshire the cat said, or or what Malcolm Gladwell said, if you work for 10,000 hours, you'll be good at something. It's not true because there's a lot of factors involved in it, but it's a guideline. It's sort of a catchy phrase that guides us. I think in terms of climate change, we haven't quite got there yet. So what do I report that is acceptable? How much is my bias allowed, and how much is actually lost in translation? Data measurements all have statistical deviations. There's a certain degree of uncertainty in everything that we measure. Even the surgeon that goes and operates, he is human. He will make mistakes, as that one book I referred to is there. And as far as possible, it's easy to report data. And when somebody wants to deny something, and especially in the food sciences and health sciences, people throw these words around that they use is called causality. If you want to deny somebody that criticizes or reviews our work, that maybe what we do actually has a major impact on something, we say, but it's not causal. And then we leave it at that. And that's just one word. Just a quick in summary, I don't want to push my luck here with time, is at the end of the day, the scientists, just like many others, follow the money. We publish or perish pretty much around money or status or promotions or whatever. And we even use AI to generate articles nowadays. We want to use AI to write our grant funding applications. Interesting. And the interesting phrase that came up from one of the books is if you also serve as an advisor or a referee on a technology board. So for me, being involved with Uyilo, the electric vehicle platform, if somebody asked me now to write a critical review on e-mobility in South Africa, I have to disclose that I am an advisor to the e-mobility program, and my interpretation will be extremely biased. Okay, that's just the way it is. And there, a problem, the self-regulation within large industries is not happening. But would I work on projects that are funded by industry? Yes, because that is where the money is. Petro industry, military spends a lot of money. They spend money on me building a battery for the military. Yes, the science is accurate. The science is correct because I want to build a very good battery. But where it then ends up being applied, that's a challenge. Sasol, we can criticize Sasol from many angles. They cause a lot of pollution, so funded Park, but they also funded thousands and thousands of PhD students in the field of science and chemistry. So, there's a lot of this discussions around that. It is not just the sciences that struggle with this. It is also commerce. The stock markets, we know, are governed by who does what in the world. Your pension fund is linked to the shares in Sasol. If we suddenly say your pension fund stockbroker says, no, we're not going to buy shares, or we're going to sell our shares in Sasol, we'd rather spend them for a green company, will you be happy with that? I think we would question that one. When we wake up in the morning, our coffee is somewhere being, there's a major global impact on how coffee was actually produced. Your smartphone that you use in the mornings, the chemicals that are in there, the lithium comes up of Bolivia, that is devastating the farming community in Bolivia. The cobalt comes probably from the DRC, and those small traces of those chemicals are actually in your cell phone that you are using. So these things are very much interconnected and very complicated, and can really depress us. So I'm saying, is there hope in my conclusion? And I really encourage us to maybe listen to David Jones's talk from National Geographic, that we must maybe just change our perspective a little bit. And did you know, and I guess all social scientists say yes, we do know, there's a happiness index. You can go and take a survey, and then you will figure out how happy you are compared to everybody else that's taken that survey. But the problem with a survey is you have to get everybody in the world to take it, which will be a bit difficult. So I thought that maybe a good measure is actually longevity. And here is sort of your global map. And just to put in perspective, again, we can feel good or bad about ourselves. Here is South Africa. The average mortality rate is between female and male is about 69 and 62 years. And we are sort of ranked in between Sudan and Afghanistan. And countries like Nigeria, Chad, Central African Republic, they are all there in the 50s, close to 60s. So that to me is an interesting measure of people's happiness, or, you know, are we getting it right? Is older people want to live longer? They're saying, okay, it's worthwhile to stick around for longer, because you know, I'm being looked after, I'm feeling good and everything. And the birth rates and the vulnerable of the society, the children, the babies, the infants, they are also being looked after, and, you know, it's keeping the birth and the mortality rate at quite a acceptable level. And there are these blue zones that we talk about, or that literature talks about. And it's interesting, Sardinia, there's a nice honors project for social scientists. Does it relate to our Sardinia Bay? There's Sardinia in Italy, Loma Linda in California, Greece. And I want to talk about Okinawa. And any reason I want to talk about Okinawa is that I went to Okinawa in 2019. I had the privilege of going with my karate group, do karate and kabuto competition there, and to attend some seminars and actually practice karate and kabuto with some of the senseis there. And just because it's also one of these blue zone countries, that they really have people that get old there. And what makes it special? You know, people live longer because they want to, because they are happy, for any better analogy of that. So they have a lot of 80-year-olds, and Okinawans develop strong social support groups that last from childhood to the later years. That was one of their things. And when you walk around there, it's a very interesting experience, and it's very difficult to describe it, and maybe it can be a different discussion. A very interesting experience engaging with the people that are there. For example, the one sensei that we trained with, he was a police officer. He's retired now. He's in his 70s. He was a police officer in a certain area of Okinawa, and in the main city. And for his 30-odd years of being a police officer, he had one murder case. That's it. He had to deal with one murder case. An interesting story on that one. The philosophy of Ikigai is there, and I like this one here. One thing that they also have is this 80% full when you eat, in terms of nutritions and things like that. And again, it's an island. Is it because they're an island that they're excluded from the rest of the world? No, they have their fair amount of trouble. They just came out of a World War II, which was devastated that island. They were caught between Japan and the USA. They have typhoons annually. They got the South China Sea crisis that's busy unfolding there. They got a US base on their island that sort of utilizes their resources. So they're not, shy of any issues that happens around there. And I'm sure they worry about global warming and the sea levels rising, but they just have a different outlook on life. And what are those slices of cheese that are in that society that actually prevents from events happening like murders and rapes and all those horrible things that we become familiar with in our press? What are those barriers that are in the social barriers that are actually there in place? Just quickly, conclusion, 2 minutes. Not easy to change one's direction. It's a principle. And in itself, if you want to change direction, has many implications. Our path, please look out for the guardrails. They are there for a reason. The speed limits, the bumps, the stop-go warnings are there. Don't ignore them. They might be good opportunities to actually reflect and evaluate, be it in your own personal life or even as a nation. We should maybe pay attention to some of these things. It was interesting. I'm sure we've heard about the N3 crisis while it was snowing. A lot of motorists got stuck. They didn't see the warning. And the weather forecasters actually got upset about that. The weather forecaster said, but we told you there is a cold front coming in with snowy conditions. And yet drivers that drove on that road didn't see the warning or didn't hear about the warning. Important to close one's circle and make the most of your most vulnerable or most precious commodity, which is time. Read a lot, not in your own fields. I read lots of chemistry and scientific articles, but I also love reading other fields of work. It rewires your brain. Learn from those that have traveled similar roads. And parents, kids, young adults, we all know about that. Hobbies besides work is very important. Get engaged with community. Pay attention to the cheese slices that are in place in your own life, in the country, in the world. Are there enough slices and cheese with, or are there holes all over the place, and we're ignoring those things that are happening? Neglect, or are those cheese slices actually being nibbled on? A dangerous attitude to have is nothing has happened yet. That comes from my being a SHE committee member all these years. Nothing has happened yet, so nothing will happen. I often come across that statement. How much bias is allowed in the science interpretation? Unfortunately, my answer is, left to my own devices, I will follow the money. Allow for peer reviewing, barriers, quality systems, critical reviewers, not critics, and policies to actually guide you when you actually engage with science and you produce new products and things like that. And a point can be reached where opinions become dogma if repeated enough. Even hard data that shows contrary will then be seen as outliers. And we do that as scientists. We pick and choose outliers, artifacts, ignore certain data points. Once going down the funnel of misbelief, the vortex will flow stronger, and then it can actually suck you in, and very difficult to get out. And that's all from my side. Thank you for your attention. And I will then just press escape and stop sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernst. So I mute myself. Oh, wow. Wonderful. Okay. So there's a lot you've packed in there. There's lots of information, lots to think about. I'd just like to congratulate you on being a scientist who is thinking philosophically about science. I really appreciate that for a start. I'm going to ask everybody if they've got questions and if they've got comments to make. And then I'll just quickly say my little contribution to give people a little bit of time. There's so much to talk about here. I've got so many notes, literally pages of them. But what came into my mind when you were talking, Ernst, is this phrase, lies, damn lies, and statistics, first of all. That popped into my head. And, you know, it's a funny thing because we need the information, right? Like we need the statistics, we need the information, we need the science, we need the data, we need the technologies that we have in many cases, you know. But what keeps coming through to me while you're talking is this feeling of, I think there's a really big disconnect between science as a method, an incredibly invaluable method, maybe the human method, if you like, methodology, and then science as a worldview. And I feel like, you know, scientific data is a form of information that, you know, it cannot be dogmatic. It cannot be loaded or biased, but the way it's used can be, or the way that the type of research that is conducted can be, you know, what questions we ask, where we look, and what it is that we're trying to work out is in its own a value-laden project. And so for me, I guess my comment would be, it seems to me that there is a confusion between what science is and how it's being used, not on your side, I mean in society, in a societal sense. Because
and saying that science is honest, you know, they will solve the problem for
that scares
they will
me.
solve the problem for me.
So trust the science, and I trust the scientific method more than I trust anything else, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't trust the way the method has been perhaps co-evolving with this economic system to create a pseudo sense of objectivity. You know, even if I mean, let me put this differently. I'm not communicating very well. Even if all of the data that we ever receive from the scientific method were to be as factually correct as possible, take out the money aspect, take out the corruption of the profit motive, follow the money, publish or perish. If none of that existed, and we still had this idea of science as a worldview, that there is an objective reality that we can know and find, that value neutrality is the ultimate goal. I feel like we're missing the majority of what it is that makes us human. and to live as human beings. So even if science and scientific information and knowledge were to be as perfect as it could be without those issues, I still feel like it's only one aspect of reality, of social life, of ecological life, of existence. And I get a little bit frightened where, the ecological economists talk about this notion of scientism and economism being these two things that are interlocking and lead into a path dependence that is creating so many problems. Economism means we just focus on the bottom line, GDP growth, and it's not greed as much as necessity. What happens if a country's GDP drops? Well, a whole bunch of problems. The only thing worse than growth in a growth society is no growth.
Oh, yeah.
So that comes to mind. Sorry, please chip in if you'd like to.
No, you're right, and I think we've prodded science and its philosophy, on a pedestal, hoping, and I think it makes us feel secure a little bit, that there's somebody that's got an answer for us, and
Yes.
somebody will rescue me, and the future will be fine, But yeah, we must be careful with that, and I think what you have said, the very tight link between economy and science is a dangerous play. Because
Yes.
if I don't allow myself to be reviewed as a scientist, we talk critical reviewing, an
Yes.
honest opinion about my science, and I only look at what the economist says that my science can come up with the next best thing or whatever, then I'm in trouble.
Yeah, I would agree.
So
Thank you so much. After so much I'd like to say, but I can't hold the conversation. Would anybody like to chip in? I don't see any hands up. I'm going to check the chat box just quickly. If anyone would like to chat with Ernst, please put your camera and microphone on. Okay, I've got a comment in the box. It says DB. I'm trying to think who that could be. Nothing's coming to mind. Okay, so question for you, or comment.
isn't that Belinda deploy?
It's Belinda.
Oh, it is Belinda. Hi.
I like your comment.
Thanks, Ernst. Emma, I'll say you the time and just quickly speak. I'm not going to repeat what I wrote. It's really just a comment, not a question. But Ernst, I think it's amazing how, as a scientist, you can reach into social sciences and humanities. I applaud you for that. As a social scientist and a humanities scholar, I myself cannot do that, to reach back to sciences. So I thank you for this, and yeah, just great admiration for your openness, and the way that you set the example in doing this. Thank you so much for that.
No, thanks for the comment. Now, just maybe on your comment there, and isn't that typical science that wants to make us live longer by giving us chemicals, instead of finding some natural way? And I'm just using Okinawa as an example. It would be wonderful to study these other zones. Why do they want to actually live longer? There must be another human way of actually wanting to live in society, and I want to live longer in my frail years, and not rely on, as Belinda says, a whole lot of chemicals that are going to keep me alive. So, yeah.
Yeah, just to clarify on that, the comment in the chat box of Belinda's was, does life expectancy equal quality of life and happiness? And that was the question posed in relation. So you've kind of answered that, just so people know what we're talking about if they don't see the chat box. Sometimes on a mobile phone. Okay, we've got a hand up from Helen. Hey, Helen.
Sorry, pushing buttons there. Hi, everybody, and thanks, Ernst. That was, I love all the stuff that you, oh, hold on, it looks like I'm done talking. We'll lower your hand. Okay, sorry, Zoom is distracting me. Okay. The bit about Isaac Asimov at the beginning, talking about all a scientist has is his or her or their reputation. And when you're asking how biased can a scientist be, it feels like, how human does a scientist have to be? And I'm wondering how professional ethics works in science industry, in science in the academy. How do you work together as a scientific community to support each other in being honest and being aware of who you're working for and what you're working with? And is there any kind of, I don't want to say policing, but it's the word that comes to mind. So I'll let you respond as you like. Thanks.
No, thanks for that. And that is an important concept within the scientists, and that also from ultra processed people, he touches on it. And within an industry, if I work as a scientist in an industry, I should not be allowed to self-regulate or to self-audit myself. And it's a strange concept, but those industries do that. You know, you come up with a chemical, it's a super flavorant, or it enhances, it's an enhancer, it makes things cheaper, it makes things last longer, whatever. And then I, as a scientist, decide this is a good product. And within the sciences, we sometimes afraid of it because what the critics say, but we need to be reviewed and have critical thinkers that are maybe a little bit further down on a certain path within the scientific field to actually look at my work and give honest opinion what is my work. And maybe sometimes we're afraid of that, especially big industries, because if think of you spending 10 years and billions of dollars on a new drug or whatever, and then somebody down the line says, nope, it doesn't work. You know, what then? So there's a lot of pressure to make sure things work. And just financially, obviously, your reputation there. But the key one is once you start drifting away from this, I'm going to allow other people to look into my space of science and critically review it. Not be a critic, but critically say, yes, makes sense. It doesn't make sense. You didn't check this properly. You didn't analyze that aspect of it, or you didn't think about this consequences of that. And especially in the biosciences, they have a real tough time. Because for me, it's easy. The chemical works or it doesn't, or the battery explodes or it doesn't, you know, and I can just measure it. But the biosciences is a lot more challenging because firstly, you're dealing with people. You want to get something out there. You want to, you know, you have a really big reputation to work with. It's tough, and you need to allow others to actually look into your space. It's tough, and because then, you know, you might be shot down and say your science is actually for the last 5 years proving the opposite. To live with that, it's difficult.
So it goes, is there regulation? Is it effective regulation? Or is that
No,
getting in the whole neoliberal thing getting washed away?
It's an sort of unwritten rule. Obviously in America, people go to court with this. So if a big pharma industry or producer of a certain chemical wasn't checked properly by the FDA, they obviously get taken to court on that. There's obviously the legal process, but the FDA itself is there's a lot of holes. So it's one of those slices. You know, we have all these slices, and it's supposed to keep the chicken. FDA, our regulators are supposed to check things that go to market, and there's holes in there. So yeah, it's complex. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Ernst. Thanks, Helen. Andrea's typed a message. Would you like to speak it, Andrea, if you're there, or if not, I'll read it.
Yes, yeah, I will speak it. Hi. Okay, Ernst, I'm actually fascinated about the relationship. It's almost a structure agency question again. And there are a couple of things that you said or wrote in the beginning of your presentation about the path and about our intentions. And they seem in tension with one another. And I was just wondering if you had a kind of a specific, clear thing that you want to say about the relationship between the path and our intentions. Because, I mean, in some senses, in the beginning, you seem to say that the path you're on kind of overwhelms your intentions. That's going to, I mean, once you're on that path, it's going to kind of channel you that way. But you also kind of you know, it isn't always the road you're on that will take you there. So does that mean there's some kind of intention that would help us get to, I suppose, wherever it is we want to go? And then, you know, obviously, if you don't know where you are going, any road will take you there. So you've got a lot of road metaphors and path metaphors, and they seem to be kind of clashing with one another. Kind of interested to know where you're going with it.
I was rushing through it a little bit, but yeah, I think it is, you know, when we start off with a project, or even if we want to travel somewhere, it is the first thing we do is an intention. You know, I want to travel to Georgia. I'm going to Georgia this weekend. But if I see a sign that says welcome to welcome, I'm in the wrong path.
Yeah.
So even though my intentions are to go there, I might end up on a different path that actually does not match up to my intentions. And we see that often with our students and us aged academics know that. We can see when the student comes with an intention letter to submit. They intend to submit, but are they traveling on that road, that narrow path, to actually be able to hand in on the 6th of December? And I think that's where the clash is, because once we get up that, for any better illustrations, the Dunning-Kruger tip, and on top we're saying, yes, I can do this. I've got 2 months left. I'll manage. Then we come down that slippery road of suddenly saying, oops, this is more difficult than I thought. And I think climate change is going in that direction. It's more difficult than we thought. We are up on the top, and we just only need to just reduce CO2, and we are on that straight path, and we can do it. But suddenly we're getting down that little region there that says, oops, it's not that simple. It's more involved. Do I stay on that path? Do I want to see it through to the end? Or do I say, okay, that's it. You know, we need to do, you know, another project or something completely different. So that is maybe my illustration about the path. When you intend to be on the path, and that's why I use maybe also the illustrations with karate and kabuto. It took me 12 years to get where I am now. You know, it takes a long time. And that's why I like these analogies of Malcolm Gladwell, and that if you want to be good at something, you know, don't sit there with a stopwatch and say, I've got 10,000 hours. It just takes a long time. And maybe with the climate change thing, for us to actually grasp and actually move in the direction that then says, okay, we need to maybe do something, and we are actually going to intentionally do something about it. It might take a long time and a steep learning experience of how that actually is going to unfold. And there I don't know how. And that's why I'm saying we are in a stage where maybe we know there is more to this climate change thing than we hope that the data is showing us. So yeah, so that is maybe the take-home message is the intention of what you want to do. Are you going to follow through on that?
Okay, so yeah, I'm really glad that you brought it to climate change, because that was exactly what was in my mind actually behind the question. And so then it's all right. Perhaps one of the things that seems to come out in what you're saying is that, okay, we're already on this path, and that path is going to overwhelm our intentions. It doesn't matter what you do. When you're on this path, you're stuck on it. The path actually pushes you and channels you. And so my question was, well, then, you know, what is science going to, how is science or any kind of thinking going to help us if we're already on the path to,
you know, that's what I was hoping to.
Yeah.
No, it's a tough one. That's I was hoping to hint with my end, saying, let's see who's doing things right. You know, what are the slices? What are the barriers that people in society have put in that actually, let's, for any better word, make them happy, or actually, or make them content. Maybe that's a better word. You know, and what do these zones have in place socially that actually makes them function? And that's a whole talk by itself. But maybe when one must look at who's getting things right in the world, there is somebody that's doing things, and that's why I was sort of tongue-in-cheek said it's nothing new that we're talking about. You know, there is somebody that's doing something right, and I just use those illustrations of Okinawa and maybe Sardinia and things like that. And let's go and investigate, and can we actually get that into our social thinking?
Okay, thank you. Em.
Thanks so much, everybody. I love that sentiment, Ernst, that you just finished with, because I just spent a few days away at a very conscious sort of festival that is, you know, there's a lot of intention setting and nice things, but I'm always sitting there thinking, oh, but the road to ruin's laid with the best of intentions, you know. But one thing that came very strongly to me through this whole process, because I've been really struggling with dealing with all this heavy stuff all the time, is to focus on the positive and what's working, and not always banging your head on the brick wall of what you think is wrong. So my research is about to start taking the exact turn that you are talking about. What's working, where do we see? Because if we're always looking for the problems, that's all we're ever going to see.
Yeah.
But I met so many people who are doing so many amazing things, who know people doing amazing things. And I'm like, well, there's no way for us to share these amazing things, really. It's very difficult. So I'm all for that sentiment. I think it's a really positive note to sort of end the seminar on, is looking towards, you know, what kind of things do we want to see, and then walking the walk, I would say. But Ernst, thank you again so very much for being the scientific voice coming in. And quite honestly, and I know nobody necessarily likes this kind of like cliche cheese, but I really do feel like this kind of seminar series where we are talking, and if we can bring art in and start crossing these boundaries, that is where the co-evolution happens. You know, it happens in micro stages. It is important. I do think so. If nobody else has got any other comments, then I think we might end off this session and move into our penultimate session. Hopefully next week, Andrea. We're back again.
Yes, we'll yes, next week.
Great. Okay. Ernst, thanks again so very much. Everyone else who's taken part today, thanks so much for your presence. Wish you a good afternoon further.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Thanks so
Bye.
much, everyone. Bye.